Hello. Good afternoon. Hello. How's everybody? Welcome to Frankenstein Tea, a daily short story program for adult listeners. With me, I'm Kristen, the director of the Island Free Library on Block Island. And I am in the library. I'm in the upper level. This is what's left of our reference section. Not much, but a little bit. Lots of libraries don't have any reference left at all anymore. It is Saturday afternoon. Hold on one second. I'm going to play with my computer so you don't hear it. Great. Saturday afternoon, December 19th. It is 3:05, and so the library is closed for the day. We had another great day out there with our kids store. Lots of fun. Something on my computer screen. Lots of fun out there. And we're done for the week. And I'm going to read you a story. So we found, my coworker found this book in the book sale today. It's a little bit beat up. I doubt we'll keep it, but maybe we'll see. And it's Chillers for Christmas. And so, it had some creepy stories in it. And I have to say, let me just read you the foreword. And it says, Christmas has always been associated with ghosts and chilling tales. I don't know about that. I wasn't sure about the first sentence. The winter solstice, the darkest time of year, produced a legacy of folklore and superstitions from early pagan times. Shadows flickering in the firelight and old timbers creaking in the howling winds. The traditional background of chilly winter evenings always encouraged the impression of strange, uncanny presences close at hand. Maybe, whoa, flipping my computer around. Maybe I'm in sync with some of that. But I read something in here and it was gruesome. It was, this guy and he bludgeons his wife and, I didn't even finish it. I was like, no, that's not the Christmas story I'm going for. But I did want to read something from here because I felt like I had been ultra traditional this week with the holiday stories, and I loved them and I thought they were good, but they were ultra traditional and, filled with some religious undertones and overtones. And so I wanted to break out of that a little. Not to say that I don't believe in the religious aspect of it, or I don't want to, but I'm not your local church. I'm your local library. So I wanted to separate the two if I could. I'm sure I'll read other religious things or stories that have religious elements as the holiday continues to approach, but I'm breaking away from that today. So this is Chillers for Christmas. And this is Just Before Dawn by Eugene Johnson. Toby Bellman hunched his shoulders and pulled his grubby overcoat closer around his thin, hungry body. His feet were cold, and the embankment air was moving in a cold draft over the bare part of his leg, exposed between the top of his short socks and the bottom of his worn trouser leg. The night was cold and damp, the moisture in the air causing the street lamps to glow through faint rainbow halos, unnoticed by the last few late-night travelers making their way home in warm, cozy cars. Toby was crushed. His spirit had finally died, slowly strangled by years of the continuous personal disasters that had finally washed him out of the sea of life and deposited him here on the embankment at Charing Cross with other human derelicts and wrecks. This night was to be his last. It was the only thing he had any control over. He was determined. He wandered down from Trafalgar Square, where he had searched the waste bins for scraps of discarded food. The great Christmas tree was in the square, and people had thronged around, some with excited children, even though the hour had been late. As he had shuffled ashamedly around, seldom noticed, but given a wide berth by those who did, he prayed that someone who may have been imbued with Christmas spirit might have given him 30p or something, just to buy a hot drink. No one did. Trafalgar Square had yielded him no food, so he shuffled off down Northumberland Avenue towards the arches at the Embankment Underground Station. Usually, he would pick himself a spot amongst the other pitiful bodies crammed alongside each other on the pavement below the railway. The overhead railway bridge and arches sheltered them from the rain, but nothing else. Collapsed cardboard boxes for mattresses, plastic bags and newspapers for blankets. They slept uncomfortably in the open street, many anesthetized by some form of alcohol or methylated spirit. Tonight, Toby passed the miserable dormitory and shuffled on a short distance further to the embankment and the river. As he sat on the embankment bench, he became aware of the silence that had enveloped the great metropolis. No cars passing now, no swishing of tires on the damp road. He looked left and then right, peering with red-rimmed eyes framed by crusted eyelashes. He was alone. He had been alone for years. The weight of his despair was physically crushing him. For a moment, his thoughts went back 7 years to the days when Toby Bellman was a successful, ebullient man, a man with a thriving transport business, a fine detached house in Kingston, a beautiful wife. No, she had been pretty, but not beautiful. He had enjoyed life, nice holidays abroad, dining out with friends, entertaining at home. The children, oh God, the children. His company had obtained some profitable contracts, hauling freight back and forth to Europe. Business was growing, and just as Toby was negotiating to buy some more container lorries, his partner killed the business stone dead. Toby's partner, Richard Stillwell, had sold the contents of several valuable cargoes. He had got a good price for them, several £100,000. The only trouble was that the cargoes did not belong to Richard Stillwell, or Toby, come to that. Stillwell had always been a flash guy, but he had known his business and he had been liked by most. He had a rather risque humor and a never-ending repertoire of stories which made him popular in the trade. He had also turned out to be a crook and had been sought by the fraud squad for the past 7 years. As a result of Stillwell's fraud, the business had collapsed overnight. Toby had to face the investigations as Stillwell had disappeared. 3 drivers had been sent to prison. Toby was acquitted of any charges, but it was the beginning of Toby's destruction. In the early days, when he was building up his firm, Toby had, in order to protect his family against the vagaries of business, put his house and several other costly items he possessed into his wife's name. His wife reminded him of this soon after the trial and constantly blamed Toby for the collapse of the business. Finally, she threw him out and sued for a divorce, which she got 2 years later. Toby had a nervous breakdown after the divorce. He went to pieces and spent several months in hospital. After leaving hospital, he had found a low-paid clerical job, but he had been unable to hold it down. His life spiraled downwards. He moved from the odd, mediocre job now and then to the abyss of unemployment. Simultaneously, his accommodation deteriorated from a small furnished flat to a furnished room, to a hostel, to the pavements. Once a decisive man, he now mustered just enough of his old will to put an end to his misery tonight. He got up from the bench and shuffled towards Westminster Bridge. He looked at the lit face of Big Ben. It was nearly 3 a.m. No wonder he was cold to his very core. He had been sitting still for hours. As he approached the bridge, he heard a car approaching from Parliament Square. Toby shielded his eyes as the headlamps swept across him when the car turned down Embankment Road. The brief flood of light had illuminated the embankment parapet, and Toby glimpsed a small packet on the broad ledge. He walked to the parapet and picked up the packet. It was a neatly folded brown paper bag. Toby opened the bag and found 2 cheese sandwiches nestling inside, wrapped in plastic film. His crusty eyes opened wide. He was starving, and here was a feast. Hunger displaced his thoughts of self-destruction. He forced his numb fingers to tear away the plastic wrapping from one sandwich, peering around nervously as if afraid someone would rush up and snatch his prize away. He stumbled forward and round the corner to the bridge, and as he lifted the sandwich to his mouth and took a bite at the delicious food, he saw a movement in the shadows of the bridge. The remnants of his heart missed a beat. Surely he wouldn't have to lose the first meal he had found for days. Toby knew he was too weak to fight off a determined assault by a brother Dosser, and he knew the assault would be ferocious. The shadow moved nearer, and Toby saw the dark bundle was small and hunched. His cracked lips curled back over his yellow teeth. He believed he could retain his sandwiches from this night prowler. The bundle halted a few feet from him. Toby stood still on his dead feet and watched carefully. He focused his eyes on his hungry competitor. He saw a broken hag of a woman before him. She was dressed in a bundle of jumbled clothes. The street lamp showed she was wearing a man's overcoat that hung open because it had no buttons to do it up, its original owner having removed them before donating the coat to the local vicar. The frayed ends of a long woolly sleeve protruded from the arms of the overcoat and whisked over her crumpled arthritic hands. She looked at him expressionlessly with black, limpid eyes. Toby saw the street lamps reflected in those eyes. The 2 Dossers stood like stone, unmoving in the dark morning, as the smooth river flowed silently below. Toby really did need to eat those sandwiches. He was starving. The old woman moved and startled Toby as she lifted those poor old useless hands, reaching toward Toby. Deep inside the human wreck that was Toby, an emotion flickered. In the depths of his despair, he felt pity for the old woman. He gave her the sandwiches and shuffled down the bridge. At the middle of the bridge, he stopped and hauled himself up onto the rail and simply toppled over. He fell, a ragged bundle, down into the river. His falling seemed an age. He had time to see the lights illuminating the buildings on the south bank, illuminated ships moored down towards Blackfriars. Then suddenly, the black, smooth, oily surface of the Thames rushed to claim him. He was surprised how soft the water was. He had expected a felling blow on impact, but it was soft and warm as he plunged into the depths. At about the same time, Toby Bellman was creeping painfully along the embankment in London. Richard Stillwell, the crooked partner of yesteryear, was creeping his cabin cruiser out of the tiny harbor of Yens in the south of France. Stillwell had been living in a holiday apartment in the village of Yens for the past 10 months. He had pretended he was a writer and from time to time posted bulky envelopes containing blank sheets of paper to fictitious publishers in England. Now the local gendarmes, who were very friendly, were becoming very curious. He decided it was time to move on. He had stayed on his boat all day studying the inshore charts. Should he go east or west? Finally, he settled for Spain. It would be a short trip just down the coast to the west. It was a calm night. The air was a little chilled, but not so cold that a light pullover couldn't handle it. Earlier, Stillwell had dined at a harborside cafe, topping himself up liberally with drink. He felt comfortable, self-satisfied, and fulfilled. No one would be concerned at his departure in the small hours. The locals had become accustomed to him coming and going at odd times. Probably this is what made the gendarmes curious. Anyway, he was on his way now, cruising quietly and steadily on a mirror glass sea towards Spain. Stillwell went down to his cabin for a cup of coffee. He looked around as he sat on his bunk. It was a very cozy little cabin, he thought to himself. Cozy wasn't the word for it. The cabin was a treasure house. It was full of currency, French, German, Spanish, Swiss, if you knew where to look for it. A thought suddenly came to his mind. Toby Bellman. Stillwell laughed out loud. What a wally old Toby turned out to be. He had ignored all the hints and nods and winks. The wally just had to be straight. Tough for Wally Toby Bellman. Just then, his outboard motors faltered, started, faltered again, and stopped. Stillwell sat listening, puzzled and cursing. He got up off his bunk, climbed out of the cabin, and went aft to look at the outboards. As he leaned out over the stern and peered down, both motors suddenly roared into life. The gleaming white boat leapt forward, and Stillwell was flung over the stern into the sea. As Toby Bellman felt himself rising to the surface of the river, somewhere in the recesses of his mind, he remembered he would have to descend for 2 more times before the river claimed him. He had broke the surface, and the sky seemed lighter than it had been a few seconds ago when he leapt from the bridge. For some reason, he began treading water and looked around. The south bank had gone. Big Ben, Westminster Bridge, gone. The sound of purring engines made him turn again as a white cabin cruiser pulled alongside. It had fat white putting fenders dangling from its side. Toby caught hold of a rope holding one of the fenders and somehow found the strength to haul himself aboard. He fell into the cozy cabin. There was no one there, just some hot coffee percolating. The night editor of a popular London newspaper put down his telephone, turned to a colleague, and told him of the puzzling call he had just received. The editor's contact at Cannon Row police station reported that a beat policeman on patrol at Westminster Bridge had seen what appeared to be a male dosser jump from the bridge in the early hours of the morning. The policeman had radioed his base immediately, and a river police patrol boat in the area was on the scene in minutes. There was no sign of the dosser, but they recovered a suntanned man wearing expensive, lightweight boating gear. They had tried to resuscitate him and thought they had succeeded when he simply gasped something that sounded like, "To be hell, man," and died. our first chiller for Christmas from Chillers for Christmas. I think that was Eugene Johnson. It's called Something About Dawn. Better than the one with the woman mutilated by her husband. That's not quite a Christmas story, but we'll see. Maybe I'll find something else from that book. For today, I hope you enjoyed that one. I hope you had a great Saturday and are ready for a terrific Saturday night. Block Island is getting a little gray. We had sunshine. We had a decent day. We had a really decent day, actually. But now it's getting a little gray. And, these are the darkest days right now. So get some lights on. Cozy up. Get something warm to drink. Maybe take a nap. Enjoy it. Whatever it is you do, enjoy it. Hi and bye to my dad who logged on there. Talk to you later, Dad. And I'll see everybody tomorrow for another episode of Frankenstein Tea. Thanks so much for coming. Peace.